Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. So far this year, I've read around 60 books, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite books, my biggest disappointments. We're going to be doing the Mid-Year Freakout Tag. Alright guys, so I don't do very many tag videos, however I try to make a point every year to do the Mid-Year Freakout Tag, and that's because it does a really good job of summarizing the first half of the year in terms of reading. So I've read a little over 60 books, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite books, some of my biggest disappointments, also some new special editions I added to my collection, some books that I am waiting to pick up and just so looking forward to. So most of the books in this video are fantasy romance with a few dark and contemporary romances thrown in there, so hopefully you'll get a pretty good rec. And this is one of my favorite videos to both watch and film, so I am so excited to get into it. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's get into these tag questions. Alright, and just one thing before I get started, I am going to be going a little bit out of order, so if you're looking for a specific tag question, use the timestamps down below. So first off, we have, what is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2024? This was easy. It is Glow of the Everflame by Penn Cole. I have not stopped talking about this book since I read it on both Bookstagram and BookTube. It is so good. It is an adult fantasy romance series. This is the second book. The first book is Spark of the Everflame. So I don't want to give spoilers for this book, but if you have not read Spark of the Everflame, we are following Diem. And Diem lives in this world where there are descended, and these people are descended from gods. So they have these godlike abilities, and they're kind of like the ruling class. Now, Diem's mother is a healer, which grants her the privilege of being able to go into this ruling class, which is normally like forbidden. And then Diem's boyfriend is actually part of this rebel human group that is trying to take down the Descended because the Descended really aren't treating the humans very well. Well, one day, Diem's mother ends up going missing, and Diem has to decide, does she want to try to find out what happened to her mother and use the Descended's help, or does she want to align with her boyfriend's rebel group and try to take down the Descended? And it goes from there, and it's so unbelievably good, especially the second book. So the first book, definitely a setup book, we're introduced to the characters, but this second book has one of the best slow burn romances that I'm obsessed. So if you have not read this series yet, please pick it up. I still have not read the third book in the series. The audiobook did come out, however, I'm waiting to be finished work and on summer vacation before I pick it up because it is a very, very thick book. I think it's over 1,000 pages. So I will be reading that probably towards the end of June, but oh my goodness, this second book is just so good. And next up is a new release that you haven't picked up yet, but really want to. So unfortunately, there are so many romantasy books that I am dying to read, but they haven't been released in audio yet, and I get most of my reading done via audio. So one series that I am counting down the days for that audiobook to come out is Crown of Oaths and Curses by J. Bree. So first off, I love J. Bree's writing. She wrote the Bonza Tai series, which is one of my favorite wide shoes fantasy romance series. If you haven't read it yet, you need to pick it up. But this series, everyone is loving, and the sequel actually just released physically, so it does fit for this prompt, but hopefully that audiobook releases soon. I know it has witches, it has fae, it is super slow burn, enemies to lovers, and true enemies to lovers. Like, apparently these guys really hate each other throughout the first book. So I'm patiently waiting for that audiobook to drop, and hopefully the sequel, the audiobook, will drop fairly quickly after. But then a dark romance that I also really want to read is Hills of Shivers and Shadows. So a lot of my friends that love dark romance have said this is one of their favorite dark romances of the year. Apparently it's unlike anything Pam Godwin has written before. It is super dark, super twisty. It's wide shoes. I believe we're following this girl that ends up being on this like isolated cabin with a bunch of guys, and things go down. But I actually got this signed out of Polygon by Pam Godwin, and she was talking about this book, and she just made it sound so dark and good, and I need to read it. So I'm pretty sure the audiobook for this is supposed to come out this year, and as soon as that audiobook drops, I am reading this book. And the next prompt is, what is a book you're looking forward to that is releasing in the second half of the year? So I swear, as soon as I start editing this video, I'm going to come up with so many books that I really want to read that are coming out in the second half of the year. However, the only book I can think of is Onyx Storm, which is the third book in the Fourth Wing series. Now, the caveat here is that that book actually doesn't come out in the second half of the year. It comes out in the beginning of 2025, so it doesn't really fit this prompt. However, I really can't think of anything. So if I think of something, I will leave it down in the comments below. I'll pin the comment. But anyway, if you are somehow unfamiliar with Fourth Wing, this is an unbelievably popular adult romantasy series, and it includes dragons. So I personally love this book. We're following Violet Sorrengail, and her entire life, she believed she was going to grow up to become a scribe. However, when she comes of age, her mother tells her that no daughter of hers is going to become a scribe, and instead she is going to have to compete against these other cadets, essentially to the death, in the hopes that she will become a dragon rider, secure a dragon, and then gain magical abilities. And it's her story, and I loved this first book, and I really love the second book, Iron Flame. So I think I am going to adore Onyx Storm. I am so looking forward to that book coming out. But yeah, that is the only book I could think of. Let me know, are you also excited for Onyx Storm? I know this book is either like a love it or hate it, but personally, I just thought it was such a fun read. All right, the next prompt is biggest disappointments. And let me start by saying there is a subscriber that left the cutest comment that said, never apologize for disliking a book. Reading is subjective. And I'm going to try to take your advice, because as soon as I picked this book, I wanted to apologize to you guys because I know this series is so well loved. Personally, this book just did not work for me. It didn't live up to my expectations. But if you enjoyed it, I am so happy for you. Like, I want people to enjoy this book. I just was not one of those people that really liked it. And that is Crescent City 3. And I can't really elaborate on why I didn't like it. I feel like in my wrap-up, I kind of went more in depth with a spoiler warning. So I'll leave that down in the description below. But I can't really get into the reasons why I didn't like this book without giving away like 1,000 spoilers. I just was upset with a certain thing that was promised. I wanted more of it. The two characters, the main characters, I just don't like them. So unfortunately, however, I will say there is a side character in this that carried this book on her back for me. Like, I loved her so much, and she is probably the only reason I finished Crescent City 3, because she was just, I will read an entire book about her and her love interest and them 100%. I love them. I just didn't love where this book went. I feel like this was much more sci-fi compared to other books that this author has written. So if you're unfamiliar with Crescent City in general, we are following, it's by Sarah J. Maas. It's her urban fantasy most recent series. We're following Bryce, and she is this half-fae, half-human girl that is living in Lunathian, and she has a few best friends. One day they all go out partying. She comes home and finds out that something horrible has happened. So Bryce, along with Hunt Athalar, a fallen angel, have to work together to try to find the person that committed this horrible act. And it's their story. That was I feel like that didn't give you a good idea what this book was about. But that's the best I could do without giving away spoilers. But overall, like I said, this book didn't work for me. I will say I rated it higher than House of Sky and Breath. I definitely dislike book 2 more than this book 3, which is really sad because actually book 1, I think I rated 4.5 stars. I loved the second half of book 1. There are scenes in there that are some of my favorite scenes that SJM has ever written. Just this book overall, I was not a fan. I didn't like what happened with some of the characters, and I'm just repeating myself at this point. But anyway, this was my biggest disappointment for the first half of the year. I'm still kind of sad about it. And the next question is biggest surprise, and I'm gonna be honest, I have 2 books for this. I could not pick between them. They are both dark fantasy romance, and it's just really funny because one of them, while I was reading it, I thought I was gonna give this book 2 stars. And then I got to the end, and I ended up rating it like 4.75, and then I read the sequel, and the sequel actually doesn't have great reviews on Goodreads. I loved it. I thought it was so fun and so unhinged. And the other book is a book that I'm actually not finished reading yet. I still have 7 chapters, but those 7 chapters are going to have to be like the most dreadful 7 chapters ever for this book not to be a 5-star read. And I'm actually really excited to talk about it because I haven't talked about it in a video yet. So first up, we have How Does It Feel? This book is so unhinged. The best way I can pitch this is Fortuna Sworn, if you've read that series, very similar tone, vibe, characters, but also there's this YA series called These Hollow Vows, and a lot of the second book in this series reminds me of that duology, if that makes sense. But in this book, we are following this girl who, when she was young, she thought she saw a fairy. And because of this, she's become obsessed with animals that have wings. So she is trying, as she's grown up, she's trying to save this animal called a lunar moth, or this moth called a lunar moth, that are endangered. So she goes to this place where the lunar moths are and accidentally falls into the Unseelie Court. And then she's almost killed like a bunch of times by the prince of the Unseelie Court. And it's their romance So I picked up the second book in this series, and for some reason it's not available physically, but I was able to listen to it via audio. I believe it's still available on Audible. And this second book is so twisty, and just, I will say, I think it could have used a little bit more editing. However, it was so fun. I've been in such a reading slump, and I read that second book, I swear, in a day. I just couldn't stop listening to it, and it's so unhinged, but so fun to read. And it's one of those books where, like, I feel kind of weird recommending it because there's definitely issues with the writing, and there are going to be people that don't love it. But if you just want a fun, dark time, please pick up this series. It's really, really enjoyable. Just check the trigger warnings. Now, the other book is actually The Last Lost Girl. And there's a little bit of a backstory to this. I picked this up at a Polycon. I was with Carrie from Book for Romance, and she had run into somebody, and they showed the special edition of this book. And I was like, I need that special edition. Didn't even know what the book was about. I was just like, this book is gorgeous. Unfortunately, by the time I got to KCL Bond, that book was sold out. But after talking to her, this book still seemed like something I would really enjoy reading. So I picked up the paperback, got the audiobook, and have spent the last 2 days just binging this book. I also kind of had like a surprise buddy read with one of my friends on Instagram. So we've been kind of reading it and talking back and forth. But this is a dark Peter Pan reimagining, and we're following this girl that her sister, her like adoptive sister, believes she has to go back to Neverland and seems to harbor some like magical abilities. And one day our main character is trying to like stop her sister from doing some self-harm. And the sister is like, nope, it is time. We're going to Neverland, and takes her, and we find out who that sister actually is. And then our main character ends up finding out that Hook is actually that Peter Pan is actually this super evil guy, and Hook ends up protecting her. And it's her story of trying to escape Neverland, escape Peter Pan. And it's so good and so dark. Like, there is some graphic violence on page that I was not expecting. It was much darker than I was anticipating. But it's so accessible in terms of writing. Like, it is such an easy read with so many nods to the classic Peter Pan story. And I'm loving this. So please, if you have not picked this up yet, I have not heard a lot of people talking about this book. It's so good and one of my absolute faves. And next up is, have you discovered any new favorite authors? I will say there are definitely authors that I might have discovered last year, but this year they became auto-buy authors. So for an example, Carissa Broadbent, I will buy any book that woman puts out. I think last year I just read Daughter of No Worlds, but now I've read Serpent and the Wings of Night, Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, Six Scorched Roses, and all of those books were phenomenal, and I just love them. So Carissa Broadbent is definitely an auto-buy author. Sarah A. Parker, oh my goodness, I'm going to talk about When the Moon Hatched later, but I had read To Believe a Crystal Bloom, and I did really enjoy that book, but When the Moon Hatched is on a whole nother level. Like, that book is just so good, especially if you love, like, beautifully written and immersive fantasy. It's amazing. So definitely Sarah A. Parker. Penn Cole, the author that wrote the Spark of the Everflame series. Actually, she is a newly discovered author because I don't believe I read anything by that author prior to picking that up. And then L.J. Andrews. Definitely. I also discovered them at the first half of this year. And The Everking is one of my favorite reads so far this year. And I'm also going to talk about that book a little bit later. So yeah, there's definitely a few. I'm trying to think in terms of like dark romance. Nina G. Jones, I want to read more from her because the one book I did read that was available in audio, I loved so much. It was so dark, but so good. It's Debt for those of you who have not read it. But yeah, so there's definitely a few authors that I've discovered, and I'm just so happy about that. The next prompt is definitely the easiest. It is a book that made you cry, and I have an entire series, so I can confidently say every single book in the Boys of Tommen series made me ugly sob. And I am not talking just like a few tears. I'm talking about just full-on ruining makeup sobbing, because the emotional journey these characters go on in every book is just, it is so just beautiful, but also emotional and upsetting. So if you're unfamiliar with the Boys of Tommen series, we are following this group of high schoolers, and we're really following just like one main family. So they are it's Shannon and her brothers, and their father is very abusive, both physically and mentally, and the mother really has no autonomy, and she really just kind of does whatever the father tells her to. Like, she's really subservient to the father. So our main character, Shannon, has been bullied in school relentlessly to the point that her mother sends her to Tommen University, and on her first day, she ends up getting knocked out by a rugby ball, and standing over her is Johnny Kavanagh, the star of the rugby team. and it is their romance, and it is really how Johnny just helps Shannon and saves her, and their beautiful relationship. It is so good. And then Redeeming and, oh, I forgot them, but 6, books 3 and 4 are my favorite books by far in the series. They follow characters that I love, Joey and Aoife. And I will say the most recent book was definitely my least favorite in the series, but I think I still ended up rating it 4 stars. Like, it was still a very enjoyable read. I still cried multiple times. I just didn't love it as much as the previous couples. But overall, if you have not picked up the series yet, it is so, so good. And the next prompt is newest fictional crush. So this is another one where I had a really hard time narrowing it down. So I have 2 different guys. Now, I will say they are from 2 different genres, but both guys kind of have a similar vibe going on. So first up, we have Eric from The Ever King. I love this book so much. If you have not read The Ever King, it is an adult fantasy romance. It has the whole pirate vibes. We're following this girl that's father ended up locking Eric, the king of the Ever, in this, like, in the Ever, which is this underwater, like, area. And our main character accidentally releases him to where he ends up capturing her and wants to use her as a hostage to get revenge on her father. Now, I love Eric, and if you have read Shatter Me, he is Aaron Warner, but he is an adult pirate version, and I've said this in every single video. You guys are probably sick of me saying it, but he uses love as both an endearment and a threat, and I live for that. But I love Eric so much. This next one, though, if you have read this book, please don't judge me. So I will say it is a Labyrinth reimagining. And I feel like most of us, when we watched Labyrinth the first time, we might have had a little crush on David Bowie. And that is why I'm obsessed with Tyrant Mercer from Fear Me, Love Me. And he is a serial killer, kind of. He's like a vigilante mobster with this labyrinth in his property. And he kills a lot of people. But he's absolutely obsessed with this young girl. So if you have not seen Labyrinth, this book kind of follows the plot. So we're following this girl that ends up going to this mafia guy to try to save her little brother Barlow, who has been kidnapped. And after saving him, Tyrant Mercer, the person that kidnapped him, becomes obsessed with our main character and starts stalking her. Definitely check trigger warnings. This book is it's a wild, dark, unhinged ride. But it is very similar to the movie Labyrinth, which I love. So check trigger warnings. I really enjoyed this. I don't know how it will be received, but overall, Tyrant Mercer was just one of my favorite guys. So highly, highly recommend. Just definitely check trigger warnings. And next up is a book that made you happy, and I had to go with Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So this is a small town brother's best friend romance, but there is a little girl that's featured in this book, and anytime she was on page, I was hysterically laughing. It has such good banter and writing. So the story is following this girl that ends up moving back into her hometown, where she ends up meeting this guy that's her brother's best friend that she always kind of had a little bit of a history with. And he has recently found out that he's a father because he was a sperm donor and didn't know he had a child until she showed up on his doorstep and was like, "Hi, my family's going through some stuff. Can I stay with you?" And it kind of goes from there. But I just loved the romance in this book, but really the banter. I could not stop laughing. So this was definitely a book that made me happy, and I can't wait to read more in this series. I know Elsie Silver just announced the next book. It has this gorgeous, like, tangerine cover, so I am so excited to pick that up. And next up is, what is the most beautiful book you acquired in the first half of the year? So this was really challenging. I narrowed it down to 4. I couldn't really pick between them because there are some books that are absolutely stunning, but then there's some that are, like, sentimental, so I wanted to talk about them. So first off, let's start with one of the sentimental ones. So this is From Blood and Ash, and as you can see, this is just the original standard edition hardback. The spine is broken because I've reread this book so many times, but I brought this to a Polycon so I could get it signed by the queen herself, and just meeting Jennifer L. Armentrout, I was in shock. I actually carried on a conversation pretty well. Like, she was one of the only authors I was nervous about meeting, but she was so nice. And I can't believe I actually have a book signed by her, because she is one of the reasons that I started this channel. So my first video ever was a From Blood and Ash deep dive where I just, like, talked about how much I loved From Blood and Ash. So it's so cool that I finally got to meet her in the first half of this year. Love that. And then next up, let's do one of the pretty books. So this is from Fairy Loot. This is A Feather So Black. And I have to say, between this and the Hurricane War, these are probably the two most stunning books that Fairy Loot has put out. I have yet to read this. I know it is a fantasy romance, I think based on The Swan Princess. I'm hoping to get to it soon. I haven't seen many reviews, but like just this book is absolutely stunning. And then going back to sentimental, this is another book I got at a Polycon. While this book is actually gorgeous, especially the naked hardback, I will take it out. But this is Stay With Me, and this is one of my absolute favorite contemporary romance series. And when I got my tickets to a Polycon, I immediately was like, Nicole Fiorina, first author I'm seeing. I need these hardbacks. I also love Nicole Fiorina. I've read all of her books. She's one of my favorite authors, and I just was so excited that I think I was the second person to actually get to her booth on Friday, and I was able to pick these books up, but they are so stunning, and I love Ollie Masters. If you have not read Stay With Me, we're following this girl, Mia, who doesn't really feel emotions, and it's been getting her into trouble. So she's sent to this like boarding school, but it's also kind of like a mental health like center. And she meets Ollie, and Ollie is the exact opposite of Mia. He feels emotions too deeply, and he is just the best cinnamon roll boyfriend. And it's their romance, and so much stuff goes down. It gets really crazy, especially in the third book, but overall, I just love this series, so I'm so excited to have these hardback versions. And then last up is a book that honestly, I did not love the first time I read it, but I do want to do a reread because the first time I read it, I wasn't reading really spicy fantasy romance, so this book was a bit of a shock. But it is Flames of Chaos. Apparently, this is a very spicy, dark fantasy romance. I have heard as you progress through the series, it gets much better. I've had so many of you tell me I need to give this series another shot, so I definitely will. But this is by the Mystic Box. And the dust jacket is also gorgeous, but I just love this naked hardback. So yeah, those are 4 of the prettiest books I got in the first half of the year. And next are books that I want to read before the end of the year. So I picked one fantasy romance and then one dark rom-com type romance, if that makes sense. So first up, we have Blood and Steel. I will say, I did not know how chunky this book was when I added it to my June TBR. So it might get pushed to July, but either way, I'm definitely reading it in or over this summer. But this is an adult fantasy romance. Apparently it's perfect for those who are fans of The Witcher and Throne of Glass. I love both of those, so I think I'm going to adore this book. I know so many other content creators have been just absolutely loving it. But I believe this is following a girl that wants to become a warrior. However, women aren't allowed to like wield weapons and become a warrior, but she has to pass this like initiation test. And then there's like this curmudgeon-y guard or someone that ends up training her, and I think it's a romance between them. But this sounds really good, so this is definitely a book I want to get to soon. And then the other one is Leather and Lark. So this is I guess it's set in the same world as Butcher and Blackbird, which is a serial killer romance that I just thought was so much fun and unlike any book I've ever read. And I don't love rom-coms typically. However, serial killer rom-coms I will read every day of the week. So this was one of my most anticipated releases, and it's finally available. So I will definitely be reading this month. I'm so excited. And the prompt we have all been waiting for: what has been your favorite read so far in 2024? So I could not pick between these two books. I honestly don't know which one I prefer because I love them for such different reasons. So I have one fantasy romance, one contemporary romance. I'm going to start with the contemporary, and to no one's surprise, it is Redeeming Six by Chloe Walsh. This is the 4th book in the Boys of Tommen series, and I have never had a book break me and put me back together like this book. I specifically remember I was on the couch up until 3 a.m. finishing this book, and I couldn't put it down. Like, it was unbelievable what these two characters have to go through and the struggles they have to overcome. The 2 books, it's Redeeming Six and then Saving Six, Redeeming Six, and they're following Joey and Aoife. And Joey is the brother of Shannon from the first 2 books, and he is a struggling drug addict, but he's also taking care of all of his siblings and has so much responsibility. And then you have Aoife, who is just the girl that loves Joey, and she is such a badass, and she's so just strong in her own way, and I loved them together, and I loved just how they supported each other, and it's such a beautiful, those 2 books are so good. If I had to pick between the 2 books, I pick Redeeming because, one, this gives us our HEA, it is a romance, but also, like, they really go through it in this one. So please, if you have not read the Boys of Tommen series, it did not seem like a series I was going to enjoy. It is younger characters. I'm pretty sure it's in the YA section of Barnes & Noble, and it's a sports romance, which, like, I'm not a big sports romance person, but these books are just so well written and so good. Highly recommend the audio because it is set in Ireland and the audiobook narrators have that accent. I did have to listen to it at like 1.75 speed. I typically listen to books at like 2.5, so I did have to slow it down. But oh my gosh, this book is just so, so good. And my top fantasy romance has to be When the Moon Hatched. Now, this book is very much a love it or hate it type book. I will say the writing in this book is a bit intimidating, very verbose, very wordy. However, it is so beautiful and just sets like this immersive world that I was obsessed. I love the character. The main character in this is my favorite main character by far in any book I've read so far. I've never related to a character so much. I loved her. So if you're unfamiliar with When the Moon Hatched, it is very hard to describe this book because you really don't know what is a spoiler and what's going to be relevant, because at the end of this book, there are a lot of unanswered questions. But we're following this girl, and at the beginning of the story, we find out that there were these creators, and they all they're like the different elements. And they sang this song, and if you could hear their song and sing their song, you were able to kind of possess a little bit of their power. So our main character, we jump in time. She is part of this group that is trying to hunt down people that are abusing this special ability. And in doing so, she ends up being captured, and it kind of goes from there. I know that's not a lot to go off of, but there are dragons, there's this romance, there's all of these different things you have to uncover. And I love fantasy romances where throughout the entire book, I'm guessing. And the fact that I was wrong throughout a decent amount of this book honestly made me happy, because this is it's not predictable in any way. And there was a twist at the end that I did not call. So highly, highly recommend. Please give this book a shot. I will say I really loved the audiobook. I think the narrators did a phenomenal job. So definitely check out the audio. My husband is reading this now, and he agrees. After around chapter 5 or 6, it seems like either we both got used to the writing or the writing just became a little bit more straightforward. But overall, I love this book so much. And I don't think this is like an official part of the tag. However, I've seen a lot of people talk about their 2024 goals for the second half of the year. So I kind of want to throw some mine in there. So one, I definitely want to get out of whatever reading slump I've been in. I'm starting to kind of make my way out of it. However, I just feel like I've been trying to read a lot of like super popular books, and some of them I haven't been enjoying, and it's really been making my reading just a struggle. So I want to kind of become a mood reader. And I feel like I say that all the time, but I need to stop trying to stick to my TBRs. And if a book is not working, I need to start DNFing a little bit sooner. So that is definitely something. I also want to try to check out some lesser known authors. Like I was saying with The Last Lost Girl, I really wasn't familiar with Casey L. Bond, and I'm loving that book. So I know there are other like hidden gems out there that I really want to check out. Even the author from How Do You Feel or How Does It Feel? I'm pretty sure it's actually a debut, but I like to read more of their works and just checking out some like lesser known authors. In terms of just like me as a content creator, I want to start doing more reading sprints. Definitely for my Patreon, because I feel like they really have been asking for reading sprints and I just haven't had the time with work. However, over the summer, I think I'm going to start doing weekly reading sprints on my Patreon, but also I'll try to do at least once a month on my regular channel, just for those of you who don't want to join the Patreon, which is totally okay. If you are interested, it's linked down in the description below. But I'd like to do more of that. I just want to be more like active, I feel like, in the community. This year has just been a lot, the beginning of the year in terms of work, and I'm so ready for summer break and to have more time to relax and read and just chill out. So those are some of my goals. I'm sure there are like so many more that I'm not thinking of. Continue kind of changing up my editing style. And yeah, just things like that. I would like to do some more read-alongs. I don't know if that's something you guys would be interested in. Let me know if it is and what series you would like to do a read-along for. Because I'd like to do one on here besides just on my Patreon. But yeah, so those are just some of my second half of the year 2024 goals. All right, guys, that is it for my mid-year freakout tag. Now, typically at the end of this video, you tag creators that you want to see do this tag. Now, I want to say if you're seeing this video, consider yourself tagged. It is such a fun tag to do. But there are some creators that I feel like deserve so much more love, so I want to tag them. So one, April from Happily Ever April, then Hannah from Hannah Blackwell, Carrie from Books for Romance, B from Mama Needs to Read Romance. Who else? There was Tiff from Tiff Talks Pages, Nikki from Nikki and Bookland. You guys are all going to kill me for tagging all of you. So many more. So I will tag more creators down in the description below. Make sure to check out their channels. They all have amazing recs. And yeah, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, and Kat. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel, and thank you all for everyone who's watched this video. And I said this already, I posted videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!